I would agree. Time is probably the most valuable asset that we have, right? And that's where I've spent the most time with AI to save. I spend time with AI to save time, and I'll kind of give you the example here, which is not nearly as bad as law or legal side of this, but when it comes to security and compliance and governance, there's a lot of documentation. I mean, just it exists, and there's so much content that's out there that you have to sift through and to understand all the different pieces of it. And it takes a lot. Just like again, Samantha can confirm this. At least from legal side, is like there's lots of law books you have to go and you have to go back and research. Like, did I understand this? To interpret it correctly?
Yeah.
Things like that.
You got to read it
So
again and again and then yeah, absolutely.
100%. So governance compliance, same way. Again, but no,
Mhm.
maybe not near as bad as legal side, but
We
close enough.
overlap very heavily. We share a lot in common.
So what I did in order to make my life easier in this situation is I can't trust AI by itself. Like I personally cannot get to the point because every time I try and test the waters, it fails me. But what I can guarantee is that if I have my own little AI project that is not influenced by outside sources, so basically I take a particular model and I build my own project and I feed it what I want it to learn and only what I wanted to learn. So it's all cross-referenceable, which is exactly how I approach this. I've now built my own mini search engine, right, that is able to cross-reference and give me referenceable materials. So even then, and this is the key part in my mind, is that even then, knowing I built all this, I still don't trust you, AI, to give me anything without error. I want whatever you give me back to have references so that I can say, you know what, that seems right. Let me confirm that this is correct, and I will go look over. So now I don't have to go find the different, like read one book to find the next thing to find, choose your own
Yeah.
adventure type situation. That's where I have found the most value in this is that I can teach something, to this model to ultimately save me time on back end research that I know that I'm capable of, which leads me to the main point of this is that you shouldn't use AI, at least in my opinion, or at least in my practice, without knowing that you're capable of doing it yourself independently. And I get it.
Yes.
It's going to take time, whatever that is. But if you can prove to me or yourself that you're capable and knowledgeable of delivering on this result, but AI can make you more efficient at it, then do it at that point. But not until you've proven that you can do it without it. And then even still, after you get through it, you should still be able to go back and prove I could have done this because this is what this means. This is how this is built. I know all the characteristics. I just took the time element away from what it was doing, away from me. So I gained it back. That's probably been my biggest piece of this, especially around governance and compliance, because I love it and hate it, whatever way you want to say, but it's a lot of reading, and I only
Mhm.
have so many hours in the day to get through this.
No, absolutely. And I'm going to end up echoing you in a second here, but I'll share my experiences of how I've used it to benefit. So in practice, right, I do have a tool that's integrated with my client management software that will solely look at the data within the client file, and that is its input, right? And so I have found it beneficial when I need a particular provision from a prior agreement that I know would be perfect for this deal and reflects the facts, but I can't necessarily quite remember where it's from. It will go through that data and pull up that provision for me. If I summarize the kind of provision I'm looking for, it'll generally be able to find that language. That then, of course, I edit. And again, it's pulling up from my own creations from the initial point. Another way I'll use it is potentially comparison to other contracts. Again, from the inputs of my contracts, um, compare certain things in case maybe I've missed a certain type of provision that would be applicable to the current deal. And then as for academics, right? I have been teaching in person for a bit with secure transactions, right? And I developed an online class, and so I needed to create more in-depth pages in the modules of what they were going to be accessing, right? And so I've already created micro learning objectives, macro learning objectives. I've created these things over time, but wanted to be able to, in a very short period of time, be able to say the more sentences that flow in a summary, right? And so by taking it into a language model, the micro objectives I have already developed, and then finding a way to say that more in a sentence like structure of summary, and then editing that those paragraphs, that's also been beneficial to me as well to cut down on time. And I want to point out that in every example, nothing was ever organically created, right? It was all based on information, either information from data that I've already written these things before, um, or I just took this particular thing, tried to morph it, and then edit it again. And I call that a sandwich method of how I approach a lot of things with AI. The sandwich, the bread, the first piece right there, the top bread is what you've created. The second part is how AI is enhancing it or affecting it. And then that final layer is you again editing, right? And so sandwich plus skill set is so important. And again, John is so Mr. Parker so right on that of having the skill set from the get-go is so important when using the tool to enhance and not just create organically, right? And
Right.
doing following that mindset and articulating that in a policy can be incredibly, helpful for organizations. And again, even if somebody doesn't follow the policy, at least the company can show that it took steps to try to regulate in this new frontier, right? Which will be incredibly important, not just for certain general liability, but of course, cyber insurance companies, et cetera, showing, hey, FTC, we don't operate in deceptive, unfair manner. Like this is how our general protocols are. Oh, look, there potentially is an EEOC violation because someone used it in a way that produced a discriminatory result. Hey, this is not how we approved use of it, right? There's just having that out there can still be beneficial, even if people are going out of their way to violate it. But again, back to the main point of that conversation, sandwich plus skill set, right? There are good ways to use it. There are bad ways to use it.
I think
I
that's a
like the
good
sandwich.
explanation.
Yeah,
Spot on.
yeah, I like that. That resonates.
So,
Yeah, have to
but
remember that.
I guess the one thing I think about is like, how far is this going to go? Like, we all watch the sci-fi movies where computers take over the world,
Oh,
right?
geez, yeah.
I mean, I'm joking, but I'm half serious too, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
No, I that's why I'm laughing. I'm like, oh gosh, where are we going with this?
Well,
Where is this going to be in a couple
what's
of
it
years?
gonna, yeah, what's it gonna look like in
Yeah.
5, 10 years? You
well,
know,
Terry, like I don't know any numbers of anybody that's in my phone, right? And I'm
right?
thinking about my kids, right? They were born with phones, iPhones. You know, how would you plan a trip back in the day? You'd go buy the atlas, you'd lay it on the table, and you'd draw out and you'd pick the route. You don't do that anymore. You just beep boop, put it in Google, and you're off, right? So
I
10
like
years,
that middle point
now,
with MapQuest and printing those out. That was fun.
yeah, oh man,
Yeah.
so bad. But what is 10 years when everything is AI from the get go, right? And the sandwich,
Mhm.
like, there's going to come a point where there is no bread
Yeah.
because you're never, and I love the analogy because you're never going to be given, or there's going to be a generation that's never going to be even given the chance to build their own bread.
So are we then saying that no skills are ever developed
I,
for people through
Could
so
be.
yeah.
what you become the prompt engineer, right? There was that time when we had those job postings out there, like master prompt engineer, and I'm like, what are we doing as humanity? I'm there were people getting paid insane amounts of money because they just were prompting AI models. But I mean, it almost, please tell me there's some other way, but that's what it looks like it's going to end up becoming.
If we don't end up having an implosion, that then there's some sort of government bailout of AI. All the fun,
Yeah.
investment problems of, certain activities happening with certain companies that are propping up certain things, outside of that discussion and just the development development function of AI and its
Yeah.
evolution, right? Yeah, it definitely can be quite worrisome of how much do we really atrophy basic skills that we've already been seeing atrophying in the brand new age of global instant communication and critical thinking, right? And so we've already seen that atrophy,
Yeah.
right? And so
So I think of Wall, the movie, right? When are we
Which
going
one?
to be like Wally? When
Oh,
they're
Wally.
all
Yeah.
the people on the spaceship, they're not doing anything anymore because all the robots. I mean, that substitute
Yeah.
robots with AI, and I mean that's going to be like, please paint me a picture where that isn't what happens, right? That's just kind of where it feels like
Right.
it's going.
Well, I think there's a blend. What you're talking about, right? Is that like Wally being one? I'll use three movies as an example. Wally is one example of it, right? And I think that if you want to go the other end, you have this like idiocracy type of approach where because you're talking about cognitive
Mm.
offloading, that you're
Yep.
going to generate that
None of
style
these
of
are good options.
processing. But the middle of the road is more the Asimov, the iRobot style, where
Mm.
you've symbiotically joined them together. And of course, I understand it's a sci-fi movie, so there's always a bad guy or
Oh, don't
bad
worry. There's
approach to it.
plenty
But
of people in Silicon Valley that support your idea's actual approach to life and anti-humanist. Don't worry. There are people that actually purport
but
these
I think that's
ideas.
where it's going. I think that if you're choosing between like these roads, if I had to choose one, I guess the iRobot's going to be the
Yeah.
path that I'm going to pick because at least there's normalcy that to our mindset. But y'all hit the nail on the head as far as early as like it's a shift in mental process, right? 10 years from now, you said your sons, your kids, right? They grew up with phones, right? The kids that are being born now, right? They are going to grown up with AI. And it's not that was science fiction to us, all of
Yeah.
us, when we were
Good
kids.
point.
Now this is a reality. So to that point, it's like this has become their norm. So how does that look? I mean, we really can't say. The hope is that we find some balance in between that works, and that we don't do all this cognitive offloading, and that we still bring skill sets to the table. Or maybe we found to this point where AI plays really well, where human still has to be involved, right? And that's the divide, and that's why I said the iRobot aspect of it. Maybe somewhere in the middle where robots and AI have their place and humans have their place, and it's coexistence at that point, and not some sort of revolution. But let's fingers crossed that we don't have Skynet, and we'll be okay.
Yeah, right? Hopefully that doesn't happen, and, I feel like there's different philosophical concerns here of, like, I feel like our initial intent with these sort of tools, at least in a, I guess you can think of it in a Star Trek way of, it was meant to improve people's lives so that they could pursue arts and other things and simply in like, exist for the sake of existing, learn, and be a part of the environment without the stresses of what we currently have under this society of financial expectations and work expectations, right? That was, I feel like, what would be, I guess, the idealized use. But then we also see how, a lot of these AI tools, they're not just developed for altruistic reasons of getting people,
Yeah.
assistance with what they're working on. It's also meant to get people hooked on these things. And then you can see unfortunate cases of situations where people are developing AI psychosis in relationships. There are literal companies that are taking advantage of death and grief by creating AI sort of avatars that, for a certain fee subscription, you can have a somewhat similar version of your dad who just passed away, and for a higher fee, you can get a more realistic version.
Um,
It's just
That's
insane.
there's
crazy.
just so many directions in which, you know, I can't even fathom what things are gonna look like, even with these sort of, the references Parker had made, which are great. I worry the financial interest behind the parties making these AI tools versus what benefits we could actually receive as a society and how we could evolve and move forward in, quality of human life, right? I feel like that will be
Yeah.
generally sacrificed for the sake of very few.
And it's
Um,
amazing to see, how much money is actually going into this. And I
Mhm.
I try to think back what is it, the internet boom, right? And all these different things, but just the sheer amount of investment and capital just being poured in. And we're the
And
IT,
circled and, thrown back and forth,
like
weird ways.
data centers are going up like whiz bang all over the place. I mean, high density stuff. We were, I mean, and I'm not the server guy, but they're talking about the fact that here soon, air cooled servers are going to be obsolete because they're only going to be water cooled because the density is so high because of all of this evolution. And
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, man, all of that is just getting so much more expensive. And the power grid, it usually you just follow the money and you see it and it's like, huh. But I'll stop there.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Oh
that,
no, I
I
can
mean,
continue with that with noise pollution, quality of human life, the human rights violations in developing countries of the initial creation of certain LLMs. Oh, I'd love to have that conversation. That would be great. But yes, it's not this time.
one of the things that I was thinking about with AI when it comes to those investments, right, is that it's like anything else. When something new comes out, it's super expensive. And so it's usually the wealthy that can afford it, right?
Yeah.
The same thing can be applied to businesses. So I think about, like, let's say that you really could use some of these technologies to develop something that is an incredible competitive advantage, but it's $100 million. And so you look at, well, who are the companies that can afford that? Well, there's this thin
Yep.
sliver at the top, and they're going to have that, and everybody else, you're not going to have access to those, right? I think about with those customers, when we see things like there's going to be an investment of $500 billion into these technologies to build out AI solutions. In my mind, I think, well, okay, you've got the hyperscalers that are going to buy a ton of that, and then are are there going to be these companies that the kinds that we work that are going to spend a million or two, or is it going to be, well, no, it's going to be Walmart. It's going to invest, they're going to get the next 100 million because you can't really get anything out of a million, right? $1 million investment, you might as well not have invested at all. You need 100 million if you're going to get serious about this. So it starts to become to where there's those that have it versus those that don't. Um, at the same time, you have all these studies coming out and saying, what was it, 90 or was it 80 or 90% of all Gen AI projects are going to be a failure, all the ones that corporate put on. And I think I have not seen um, clear cases. I haven't seen like amazing breakthroughs that I was expecting to hear because we have AI. And then I'm very, uh, when I see these companies and say, oh, we laid off 40,000 people because of AI, I'm very skeptical about that. I think that's, you want to lay people off. How do I spin this in a positive way? I say it's because we're such on the cutting edge with AI. We've developed all these technologies. But in the reality, I have a hard time in a lot of cases believing that that's really accurate, right? So I don't know. Yeah, there's no doubt it's going to have a big impact. I do feel like we're hitting the trough of disillusionment at some point here with that. I mean, we haven't had any customers directly say we've got so much AI going on that we're just letting everybody go. We don't need people anymore.
Yeah.
Through that.
Yeah, there has been some overhype by the companies of themselves producing these products of what it can and can't do. That's why that whole AI became a buzzword thing for getting people to buy anything, came
Right.
about. That I think, Terry, you can speak way more on than I can. But yeah, it just,
Well,
at the same time of worrying about how we've progressed this far in such a short amount of time and how quickly that can continue to evolve, right? There are those concerns we talked about earlier, but at the same time, there is also overhype of what these products can even do in the first place.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny you say that. The thing that I think is interesting is it's less about the product and it's more about the business itself that I've seen more of a trend, which is like, hey, we actually are shutting down these other business units to bring up our AI business unit. Not that it has anything to do with tool, it has to do with to go to market, we want to create this thing. So we're gonna shut down what we're doing over here and bring up, resource over it. We're going to reallocate funds. So that means layoffs or whatever that means. That's actually what we've
Right.
seen more of. Not that AI has replaced people or anything like that. It's more we're going to get on the bandwagon. I want to get that money. I want to get whatever this is coming in. And how am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to have to dedicate cycles to this. And the only way I can do this, I got to shut down this other stuff and bring this up over here. That's the more common one we've seen today, as by comparison to the hype. It's not that AI has replaced jobs, it's that AI as a business has been replacing the jobs, right? It's like, hey, our AI business model over here that we're going to delve, a million, billion, whatever dollars into this. We don't have time for cloud anymore. Like, who needs cloud? Which that was the big hype. Is like we're focused on this over here.
Yeah.
I seem to recall it was like IBM that announced some ridiculous number of folks that got let go from HR. I was like 40,000 or something. So my first thought was, how in the world do you end up with 40,000 people in HR? But still, I just thought that was just an incredible number. But I just don't think we've seen that. And to some cases, I start to question myself. It's like, well, is it because I have not seen that level of effort and emphasis into making something do that? Is it a matter of to pull that off? It can be done, but it's this whole thing, and I'm judging it based on dabbling with certain things. It's like with the AI agents, right? That's the new thing. Everything's going to be agents, and it's going to be swarms of agents. They're going to be communicating. They're going to be doing all these things. And then, meanwhile, my experience in a lot of cases, when I say create me a customer or create me an internal employee list with email addresses and titles, it can't do it. And the idea that you're going to have swarms of agents that are going to take over all these things, I'm like, I don't know. I'm struggling to see how that's going to work out when it often can't handle what I think I could get an intern to do pretty effectively. And I don't just mean the smart interns. I mean from whatever school, whatever grade, to create me a internal people directory, and AI can't.
Yeah, and I think so, John. You bring up a good point, and I hadn't really thought about it. But is this the next big money pit, right? And or the next big buzzword? And I've kind of been through that. So for a while there, it was all about digital transformation, right?
Yeah,
And
that was the big one.
digital twins of your organization. And, all the consultants were talking about that. And here we go. All of the companies were investing in it. And they had to get on that big hype train and they had to go do this thing because all these other companies were supposedly doing all that. So I think to what you're saying, right, we're seeing the indicators. And just like all those other buzzwords that I just, mentioned, time will tell if there is truly something that will come of it, right? But it kind of feels in those same veins, right? And Terry, I think, yeah, you're keeping your thumb on the pulse of it, right? And yeah, I'm not seeing it, but man, it seems like there's a lot of money going into it.